Welcome to part two of our episode, Reducing Your Risk for Prostate Cancer. In part one, we spoke about lifestyle, we spoke about obesity and being overweight, we spoke about green tea, we spoke a little bit about selenium, and we spoke a little bit about other factors that influence the risk or lower your risk of developing prostate cancer. And now we're going to take that discussion a little bit further. So, welcome to part two of our episode, Reducing Your Risk for Prostate Cancer. Hi, my name is Jerry Hickey. I'm a pharmacist who also has studied nutrition, and I'm over here at Invite Health. I'm also the scientific director. Please be sure to subscribe to the Invite Health podcast, and please leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. All of the information on today's episode will be linked in the episode description, and you can visit invitehealth.com/podcast for more information. So let's get going. Let's just discuss very quickly cruciferous vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables are cabbage-related vegetables, and there's so many of them. There's kale. I mean, that's pretty trendy in restaurants. When I was a little kid in Ireland, we used to eat kale all the time. There's cabbage and Brussels sprouts and broccoli. Don't have Brussels sprouts very often because they can concentrate heavy metals, so you don't want to do Brussels sprouts. Of course, there's broccoli, there's bok choy, there's broccoli rabe, there's maca root, there's mustard greens. There's so many foods. Down south, there's collard greens. There's so many foods that are related to cabbage vegetables. When you break down cabbage vegetables, the ingredients in the cabbage vegetables are worked on by the bacteria in your intestines. And there's a whole bunch of these. There's glucuronic acid. Glucuronic acid seems to seal toxins into your stool. That's useful for somebody who's constipated, that's not getting rid of the toxins in their colon as frequently as people who are regular. When you eat cruciferous vegetables, there's sulforaphane. It's an isothiocyanate. It's been shown to stimulate phase 2 detoxification. It's been shown to be a powerful antioxidant, very protective. It's been shown to help break down chemicals and toxins in your body and stimulate antioxidant protective systems in the body. And then there's the indole carbinol, indole 3-carbinol, which has been connected to a lowered risk of a number of cancers, mostly sexually related cancers like breast cancer, possibly ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, prostate cancer. But the data is still not quite there, but there is something to it. There is a lowered risk. We don't know to what extent. When you chew on the broccoli and other cabbage vegetables, you release indole 3-carbinol. The bacteria in your intestines, if you have sufficient quantities of good bacteria, work on the indole 3-carbinol. It's actually a food for them, and they stack it up into different unit sizes. And it becomes 5 different things that help the body cope with viruses, like human papillomaviruses and herpes viruses, that help the body get rid of certain toxins, that help protect breast tissue and ovarian tissue and vulvar tissue and cervical tissue, but that seem to lower the risk of prostate cancer. And the most powerful ingredient, if you stack up 5 indole 3-carbinol, it becomes DIM, diindolylmethane, seems to lower the risk of prostate cancer if you have it 2 or 3 times a week. Always cook cabbage vegetables, otherwise they can slow down your thyroid gland. But once you cook them, you get rid of the ingredient that's a coiturgen. We don't even know which ingredient that is, by the way, but there's something in raw cabbage vegetables that slows down your thyroid. But if you cook them, it doesn't happen. However, if you eat cooked cabbage vegetables 7 days a week, it could still slow down your thyroid a little bit. So only have to cook cabbage vegetables 3 to 5 times a week. But there is some teeth to that argument. There is something to that discussion about cabbage vegetables lowering the risk of cancers and especially fighting viruses, which is not a bad thing, the sexually related viruses. Now, let's look at Duke University. Duke University did several studies on flaxseed. I love flaxseed. Flaxseed is a big product for the north central United States and for Canada. There's been a lot of research from both countries. We get our flaxseed. It's organically grown, non-GMO from the Dakotas, North and South Dakota. It doesn't seem to matter if it's the blonde flaxseed or the brown flaxseed. They seem to be equal. In any event, Duke University's down in Durham, North Carolina. They did a series of studies on flaxseed. Some of the studies are lowering the risk of prostate cancer, And in a future episode, when we talk about helping to treat prostate cancer, I'll discuss the studies from Duke University, how they gave flaxseed to men with prostate cancer, and it seemed to have some relevance, some protective benefit. And I said that in the original part one of this episode, that the things that seem to lower the risk of cancers also seem to help fight these same cancers. So this is the journal Urology, the urinary tract. Of course, you know, the prostate is an organ in the pelvis. It's sitting on top of your urethra, which is basically your garden hose to get rid of urine. And it's involved with sexual reproduction. And when it swells, it's a very crowded area, your pelvis, so it clamps down on the urethra and you get all those lower urinary tract symptoms. But of course, prostate cancer is even much more scary than that. So this is a pilot study. A pilot study is an exploratory study to see if you should go further. But it's Duke University. And it's based on the shoulders of other researchers and a number of other studies. Now, what's in flaxseed, by the way, that's good for you? Well, there's protein. Flaxseed is a good source of protein. It has all three groups of essential fatty acids, the omega-3 that are similar to the fish oils. They're polyunsaturates. Omega-6s, which are found in vegetable oils, those are polyunsaturates. And then the omega-9s, which are monounsaturated, that you would find in things like olive oil or walnuts. What else is in flaxseed? Well, there's both soluble and insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber cleans out your colon, so insoluble fiber may lower your risk of colon cancer, but it usually reduces the amount of sugars and fats in your intestines. Not a bad thing because you're getting rid of some cholesterol and some triglycerides. And the soluble fiber gets absorbed into the bloodstream and helps clear out toxins from the bloodstream. That's not a bad thing either. By the way, if you don't have flaxseed, a good source of soluble fiber, apples, one of the reasons why they're so healthy. Now, the other thing in flaxseed are lignans. Lignans are converted by the bacteria in your intestines into active constituents that seem to lower the risk of cancers. They've connected flaxseed to helping with pimples and acne in both young men and young women, to hair loss, lowering the risk of hair loss, the type you see, the androgenic alopecia, the kind that you see in both men and women, is the most common form. It used to be called male pattern, but it happens in women too. They've shown flaxseed reduces cholesterol, flaxseed reduces blood pressure, and flaxseed seems to reduce the risk of certain cancers. So this is a pilot study. They gave flaxseed with a fat-restricted diet or a placebo, and they found it had a real effect on men's prostates. It lowered their prostate-specific antigen significantly. Now, that's the PSA level. It's a blood test. That's a biomarker. When your PSA rises, they look at that and other factors to give them a big clue is their prostate cancer. Now, these men were scheduled, they had big prostates, they had elevated PSA. These men were scheduled for biopsies, you know, a needle aspiration of prostate tissue to see if there's cancer. And a number of the men who went on the flaxseed no longer needed the biopsy because their PSA went back to normal. They also found that flaxseed was preventing further enlargement of the prostate, growth of the prostate. Like I said, when the prostate enlarges, it clamps down the urethra, it's hard to urinate, you get all those lower urinary tract symptoms. Interestingly, flaxseed had no effect on testosterone. Now the evidence on mushrooms. There's many edible mushrooms. The issue with these studies is they're not breaking down the types of mushrooms. They're looking at how frequently men ate mushrooms. Now, I have to tell you, there's already been connections between consuming mushrooms and a lower risk of breast cancer. So, both mushrooms and green tea have been connected to a lower risk of prostate cancer. Both mushrooms and green tea have been connected to a lower risk of breast cancer. We'll do that in a future episode. Lowering the risk of developing breast cancer, which is another very common cancer, obviously. In the studies with breast cancer that were done in China, in regions of China where there's a higher incidence of breast cancer, women who frequently had mushrooms had a lower risk of breast cancer. And if they mixed the mushrooms with green tea, the incidence of breast cancer was way down, and it could have been dried mushrooms. So here's mushrooms and prostate cancer, and it's in the International Journal of Cancer, and it's looking at 36,500 men between the age of 40 to 79 40 to 79. I mean, those are the years when you're at risk for cancer, right? And they were followed generally for 13.2 years. That's the median. So maybe they were followed for 10 years, maybe they were followed for 16 years. Compared with not eating mushrooms very often, like once a month or once every 2 weeks, if you had mushrooms once or twice a week, it lowered your risk of prostate cancer by 8%. Now, there was a linear association, which makes the evidence even stronger, because if you had the mushrooms more frequently, 3 or more times a week, it lowered your risk of prostate cancer by 17%. That makes it strong. When you see that, the more frequently you have something good, the lower your odds of developing a certain disease. That makes the evidence stronger. So it's in the International Journal of Cancer. It's Tohoku University School of Public Health. And also the Beckman Research Institute in the City of Hope, Duarte, California, and Penn State University over in University Park, Pennsylvania. So this is a really, really big review of 2 huge studies, the Osaki cohort study and the Miyagi cohort study. Once again, it's 36,500 men between the age of 40 to 79 followed, median following for 13.2 years. So I want to go into it a little bit more. If they had the mushrooms 3 times a week or more, it reduced the risk of prostate cancer by 17%. Now, that's really not hard to do. But here's the thing. It didn't matter what else they were doing. It didn't matter how many vegetables they ate, or fruit, or meat, or dairy. Meat and dairy have been shown to increase the risk of prostate cancer, where vegetables and fruit have been shown to decrease the risk of prostate cancer. It didn't matter. Mushrooms lowered the risk of prostate cancer. So being that it didn't matter what other risk factors there were, that mushrooms still lowered the risk of prostate cancer, and the connection was linear, meaning the more frequently you had the mushrooms, up to 3 times a week, the stronger the evidence was for lowering the risk of prostate cancer, reducing the risk by 17%. That's powerful evidence. Now, let me just say this. 17% is actually a big figure in a cancer that's so unbelievably common. Reducing the risk 17% is saving tens of thousands of men from developing prostate cancer, or possibly putting it off for many, many years. And also, of course, something that generally lowers the risk, also generally, if you're going to develop a cancer, tends to make it a weaker version of a cancer, a more treatable form of a cancer. Let's go to a break. Jerry Hickey, Invite Health. We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
Okay, welcome back. In the first part of this episode, I went over a review in a journal of lycopene and prostate cancer. But now I want to go over individual studies because I think it's important. Lycopene is the red stuff in tomatoes. Now, eating a raw tomato, the red stuff is generally tied up in the fiber of the tomato. You don't absorb that much. But when you cook down the tomato, you release the lycopene from the fiber. Plus, because you generally add olive oil to tomato sauce, that improves the absorption of the lycopene because it's fatty soluble. Anything that's fatty soluble, if you add a fat to it, like an oil, you improve its absorption. So this is the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. It's in the journal Prostate Cancer and Prostatic Diseases. And it's good. It's a systematic review and dose-response meta-analysis. So once again, high level of evidence. A systematic review means they go to all these websites that collate data on research, and they download all the applicable studies. In this case, it's tomatoes and prostate cancer. And dose response meta-analysis means if you have it more frequently and a particular type of tomato product, does it make a difference? And yes, it did. So they found 30 studies in their meta-analysis of prostate cancer risk. It was over 24,000 men who developed prostate cancer out of 260,000 men total. So 260,000 men, 24,000 developed prostate cancer. Higher total tomato consumption associated with a reduced risk of prostate cancer by 19%. Now, once again, that means something. 19% for a cancer that's so common. But raw tomatoes didn't have the impact. It wasn't raw tomatoes. It was more like cooked tomatoes, like tomato sauce. Now, here's another one. Brigham and Women's Hospital, the Channing Division, and Harvard Medical School. It's in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. And once again, they're looking at lycopene, tomatoes, and prostate cancer risk. And they found frequent consumption of tomato products is associated with a lower risk of prostate cancer. I mean, come on, Harvard? And here's the last one I'm going to go into, because this one's from Europe. It's from Europe. It's the EPIC study. I love the EPIC study. So much research is coming out of that. It's a prospective study. I love prospective studies because they give you so many clues on things that you have to follow up with research on. For instance, a prospective study would get a large population of people, maybe 30,000, maybe 50,000, maybe 100,000. And then it follows them for a long time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And throughout that, they're giving them medical checkups. They're looking at what diseases they develop. They're looking at their lifestyle, like do they exercise? Are they overweight? They look at the food they eat, the supplements they take. So there's so much evidence. So from one perspective study, you could look at so many different diseases, diabetes, different types of cancer, heart attacks, strokes, because when you have a large population of like 30,000 people that you're following for 20 years, you're going to see, why did these 900 people have a stroke and why did these 900 other people not have a stroke? So it gives you a lot of evidence. So out of the EPIC study, a huge prospective study that's been going on for decades in Europe, increased blood levels of lycopene. See, that's important. They were looking at the blood level. They didn't take people's word for it. Increased blood levels of lycopene reduced the risk of advanced prostate cancer by 60%. Now, that's important. That's an important statement. A lot of prostate cancers are mild, and as long as they stay encased in your prostate, they're never going to hurt you. But once they change in character and become essentially a different cancer and more advanced and harder to treat, that's when they become life-threatening. That's called advanced prostate cancer. So the tomato products not only reduce your risk of prostate cancer, but they reduce your risk of developing dangerous prostate cancer, advanced prostate cancer. So just to summarize, between the two episodes I've done on lowering the risk of prostate cancer, being obese and being overweight and being very obese all increased the risk of prostate cancer. Being overweight increased it a little bit. Being obese increased it a lot more. Being very obese increased the risk like 30%. Red meat increased the risk a little bit, but it was worse if it was barbecued or grilled or smoked or fried. Because when you cook meat at high temperatures, it changes the way the proteins and fats are in the meat, and it makes them more carcinogenic. Processed meat was more connected to prostate cancer than red meat. Dairy may have been, I can't tell you if that's true or not. I just don't find the evidence to be that credible. Cabbage vegetables seem to lower the risk. Mushrooms seem to lower the risk. Flaxseed seems to lower the risk. Lycopene from tomato sauce, lots of evidence it lowers the risk. Selenium, the mineral, lots of evidence it lowers the risk. And also green tea, lots of evidence it lowers the risk. I really do believe that flaxseed, eating a good diet full of fruits and vegetables, getting exercise and keeping your weight down, supping on green tea with lemon in it, they lower your risk of prostate cancer. Green tea, flaxseed, selenium, exercise, all good. They lower the risk of many cancers. They lower the risk of many cancers. If you get a lycopene supplement, you want it above 5 milligrams. For instance, all my multiple vitamins, I have a liquid-filled capsule in them, and one of the ingredients in that, because there are certain ingredients that should be in a liquid form, is lycopene, natural, in a base of tomato oleoresin. I get it from is real, because there's been a lot of studies on that particular lycopene for skin health. It's unbelievable for skin health, for protecting the heart and your blood vessels, and for protecting other tissues in the body, such as the prostate. Thank you for tuning in to the Invite Health Podcast. You can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts, or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Please make sure you subscribe. Please leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. We'll see you next time on another episode of the Invite Health Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.